The North Atlantic was a beast of gray, churning steel. Liam Mac Corrigan watched it from the viewport of the Prometheus, a vessel so technologically advanced it felt sterile, alien. Below, miles down in the crushing dark, the ocean held its breath. It held his past, his ghosts, and now it held his sister, thalassophobia, the doctors had called it. A clinical, tidy word for the primal terror that lived in his gut. The fear of deep, open water. For a former Royal Navy combat diver, it was a cosmic joke. He'd survived the collapse of the Odyssey salvage op, the one that took his entire team. He'd been the last one out, the dying screams of his friends echoing in his ears as a mountain of twisted steel entombed them. He'd surfaced, but a part of him never did. Now, he masked the fear with a cold, hard professionalism that kept everyone at arm's length. It was the only way to keep working, to keep diving into the very environment that haunted his waking moments. Impressive, isn't she? The voice was smooth, like oil on water, and just as suffocating. Julian Thorne stood beside him, impeccably dressed in a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Mac's last freelance contract. Thorne, the tech billionaire, the treasure hunter, the man who saw the ocean not as a wonder, but as a vault to be cracked. His rival. "It's a boat, Thorne," Mac said, not taking his eyes off the waves. "It floats. That's its job." "The Prometheus does more than float, Corrigan." "It commands," Thorne corrected, a smug smile playing on his lips. "As does the submersible you'll be piloting. The Charon, my finest creation. She can withstand pressures that would turn a military-grade sub into a tin can. Then why isn't one of your own hotshot pilots taking her down?" Thorne's smile tightened. "Because my lead research vessel, the Nautilus, has gone silent. Directly above the target. Its last position puts it docked with the objective." Mac finally turned to face him. "The Bov objective? You told me this was a rescue. You said Eris, Dr. Corrigan is a part of the crew, yes." Thorne cut in, his eyes like chips of ice. "A brilliant marine biologist. Her insights were invaluable, but they found it, Mac. The prize I've been chasing for a decade. The HMS Hecate." The name sent a chill down Mac's spine that had nothing to do with the Atlantic wind. The Hecate, a ghost story whispered among salvage crews. A World War II submarine that vanished on its maiden voyage, rumored to be carrying Nazi plunder of the most exotic kind. It was a legend, a career maker, or a tomb. "The wreck is located in the Medusa Trench," Thorne continued, gesturing to a holographic map shimmering in the center of the bridge. A jagged scar in the ocean floor glowed red. Locals called it the Sailor's Maw. My team in the Nautilus confirmed its position, then silence. No distress call. Nothing. "I need the best, Mac. I need you to go down there, pilot the Charon, and bring my people and my property back." He named a figure that was staggering, enough to retire on. Mac's jaw clenched. It was never just about the money with Thorne. It was about possession, about winning. And Eris was caught in the middle of his game. His estranged sister. They hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since a bitter argument about him working for men like Thorne. The irony was a bitter pill. "I don't care about your property," Mac said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm going for my sister. You'll double the fee. Half now, half when I get her back on this deck. And I get final say on the operation once I'm down there. No questions." Thorne studied him for a long moment, a predator weighing its options. "Fine," he conceded. "You'll be accompanied by my lead pilot, Soren. He knows the Charon systems better than its designers." A man stepped forward from the shadows. He was tall, with a Scandinavian stillness and a calm, professional demeanor that was almost unnerving. He nodded crisply. "Mr. Corrigan, I'm Soren. A pleasure." The Karen is prepped and ready for descent. Mac just grunted in response. He didn't need a babysitter. He just needed to get Eris back from the bottom of the world. The descent into the Sailor's Maw was a journey into primordial night. The Karen was a sphere of titanium and acrylic, a fragile bubble of life in a realm of absolute death. Outside the viewport, the last vestiges of sunlight vanished, replaced by an oppressive, featureless black. Mac's hands were steady on the controls, but his knuckles were white. He could feel the weight of the water above them, an inverted mountain pressing down, seeking the smallest flaw, the slightest weakness. The rhythmic ping of the sonar was the only sound, a lonely heartbeat in the void. His thalassophobia was a cold knot in his stomach. He focused on the instruments, the pressure gauges, the life support readouts, numbers, data, things he could control. He imagined the hull groaning, buckling, the spiderweb cracks that would precede a violent implosion. He saw the faces of his dead crew from the Odyssey. Pressure at 400 atmospheres. Soren reported, his voice a placid drone that cut through Mac's dark thoughts. All systems nominal. You handle her well, Corrigan. I've handled worse, Mac lied, forcing the tremor from his voice. After 2 hours that felt like an eternity, the sonar painted a picture on their screen. Two shapes, one sleek and modern, the other jagged and ancient, locked together in the abyss. There, Soren said, pointing. The Nautilus. And, my God, the Hecate. The sub's external lights blazed to life, cutting a cone of white through the darkness. The wreck of the Hecate was a monster. Larger than the record suggested, it was a skeletal leviathan, encrusted with a century's worth of marine growth, its hull plates peeling back like rotting flesh. It rested on a ledge, bow pointing into the infinite black of the trench. Docked awkwardly against its midsection was the Nautilus, looking like a parasite latched onto a carcass. Its lights were dark, its silence was profound. No power signatures from the Nautilus. Soren confirmed, his calm finally tinged with concern. Docking clamps are engaged. We can't retract them from here, which means I have to go out and disengage them manually from their exterior panel. Mac finished, his heart sinking. Then I can get inside and see what happened to the crew. The pressure suit is rated for this depth, but only for short-duration EVAs, Soren warned. 15 minutes, max. It's enough. The process of suiting up was a familiar ritual, a comfort. The heavy helmet clicked onto the collar, the rebreather hissed to life, and the world became a cocoon of his own breathing and the crackle of the comms. He cycled through the airlock, the small chamber flooding with icy water, and then he was outside, suspended in the killing dark. The fear was a physical thing now, a hand squeezing his chest. The Karen was a small island of safety behind him. In front of him was the void. He activated the suit's thrusters, propelling himself across the gap towards the conjoined vessels. The wreck of the Hecate loomed, a sepulchre of rusting steel. Its silence was wrong. Shipwrecks groaned. They settled. This one was utterly, unnaturally still. He reached the Nautilus and located the external panel. As his gloved fingers worked on the manual release, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He looked up at the Hecate. One of its forward torpedo tubes, long sealed with rust, seemed to open. Just a crack. And from within, a single impossibly large bubble drifted out, wobbling as it rose into the darkness. Mac shook his head. Nitrogen narcosis? The pressure playing tricks on his mind? He finished his work, and the clamps disengaged with a metallic groan. Now for the hard part. He maneuvered to the Nautilus's main hatch and cycled inside. The submersible was dead and cold. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. But it was the emptiness that was most terrifying. Equipment was scattered, a tablet lay smashed on the floor, and a half-finished cup of coffee was still secured in its holder. No crew, No Eris. Soren, I'm inside the Nautilus, he said into his calm. It's empty. Signs of a panic, but no bodies. No signs of a hull breach. Check the logs, Soren's voice crackled back. Find out what they saw. Mac found Eris's station. Her datapad was still active, a single audio log left open. He pressed play. Eris's voice, strained and filled with a mixture of awe and terror, filled his helmet. Log entry 7. The energy readings are off the charts, localized entirely within the wreck. It's not radiation. It's something else. A quantum signature that shouldn't be possible. The crew is getting spooked. Jensen swears he saw someone looking out of the conning tower porthole. That's impossible. We're getting echoes on the comms. Whispers. A German lullaby. We have to investigate. I'm taking Jensen and a cutter into the forward section. There's something in there, something they were guarding. The log ended abruptly with a burst of static and a sharp, terrified scream. Soren, Mac said, his blood running cold. She went inside. She went into the Hecate. That's a suicide mission, Mac. The hull's integrity is non-existent. She's my sister, Mac snapped. I'm going in after her. He grabbed a plasma cutter and a sidearm. Thorne had insisted on packing a high-caliber pistol designed to fire self-propelled darts. At the time, it seemed like paranoia. Now, he wasn't so sure. He exited the Nautilus and positioned himself at a corroded access hatch on the submarine's dorsal spine. The plasma cutter hissed, spewing incandescent light that beat back the abyss. The metal groaned in protest before a section gave way, peeling back to reveal a corridor of pure darkness within. The air that puffed out smelled of decay, ozone, and something else. Something like static electricity and old blood. I'm in, he said, stepping over the threshold. Soren, maintain position. Keep this channel open. Acknowledged, came the reply. Good luck, Mac. The moment he was inside, the hatch cover he'd cut away slammed shut behind him with a deafening clang that wasn't possible in the water. He was plunged into absolute darkness, his suit's lights the only illumination. He was in a tomb, and he was not alone. The inside of the HMS Hecate was a labyrinth of rust and ruin. Every surface was slick with a grimy film, and the silence was a living entity, broken only by the drip of unseen water and the groans of the dying hull. It was a sound Mac knew well, the death rattle of a steel behemoth, but this was different. The groans sounded almost vocal. He pushed deeper, his light cutting a nervous swath through the gloom. The layout was all wrong. He'd memorized the schematics for this class of submarine, but the corridors twisted in impossible ways. He passed a sealed door marked messy, walked 20 yards down the passage, and found himself back at the same door. A cold dread, separate from his phobia, began to seep into his bones. Soren, are you getting this? Mac's breath hitched. The interior it's not right. It's like the geometry is shifting. Sensors show no anomalies, Mac. You're proceeding in a straight line towards the aft section. A lie. Mac knew it was a lie. He could feel the wreck playing with him. From the corner of his eye, he saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the corridor. It was tall and gaunt, clad in the tattered remains of a Kriegsmarine uniform. Its skin was waterlogged and gray, and its face was a mask of placid agony. It didn't move. It simply was. As Mac raised his light, the figure glitched, stuttering in place like a corrupted video file, and then phased out of existence. He forced himself forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. The whispers started then. Faint at first, bleeding through his comms. Snippets of German, panicked English. A sound like a wet, desperate gasp. The collective death agony of an entire crew, imprinted on the very metal of their tomb. He found a datapad lying in a pool of brackish water. Eris's. A single, corrupted video file was on it. He played it. The image was jerky, filmed from the perspective of someone running. Eris's panicked breathing filled the audio. She was in these same corridors, her light dancing over walls that seemed to writhe. A shape lunged from a doorway, one of the phantoms, its movements unnaturally fast and jerky. The video cut out with her scream. She was heading aft, towards the reactor and engine rooms. He followed, pushing through flooded compartments where debris drifted like morbid confetti. The feeling of being watched was constant, a pressure on the back of his neck. He rounded a corner and came face to face with another one. This one was an officer, his hat still on his head, his mouth open in a silent scream. A gaping black wound was torn in his chest. The phantom raised a wavering, translucent hand, its fingers elongating, reaching for him. Mac didn't think. He raised the dart gun and fired. The projectile hissed through the phantom's chest without effect. It didn't even flinch. It just kept coming, its eyes empty voids. He scrambled back, slipping on the slick deck, and the phantom flickered and vanished. Bullets were useless. He was in the engine room now. The massive diesel engines were silent, but a strange, low-frequency hum vibrated through the deck plates. It was coming from a sealed bulkhead at the far end of the compartment, one marked with frantic clawed scratches and a crudely painted warning in German. Nicht öffnen, Die Glocke, do not open, the bell. The hum was stronger here, a nauseating thrum that made his teeth ache. Thorne's prize, the source of this nightmare. He knew Eris would have been drawn to it, the scientist in her unable to resist the mystery. He braced himself and forced the bulkhead door. The chamber beyond was a scene from a fever dream. It was the submarine's reactor room, but the reactor itself was secondary to the object that dominated the space. In the center, suspended in a gimbal of tarnished brass and wiring, was a massive, bell-shaped device. Die Glocke. It pulsed with a sickly violet light, a light that didn't illuminate but seemed to swallow the surrounding darkness. The air crackled with energy, and reality itself felt thin, stretched, taut. And there, huddled behind the cooling pipes of the dormant reactor, was Eris. With her was a single crewman, a young engineer Mac recognized from the manifest as Jensen, his face pale with terror. They were cornered. Between them and the door stood a congregation of phantoms. At least a dozen of the glitching, waterlogged crewmen, their spectral forms more stable here, closer to the source. They weren't just standing there. They were waiting, their dead eyes fixed on the two living souls. "Eris!" Mac yelled, the sound swallowed by the hum of the bell. Her head snapped up, relief and terror warring in her eyes. "Mac, it's a trap. The bell, it feeds on energy, on life. It draws you in." The phantoms turned as one, their heads swiveling with an unnatural, synchronized motion. Their attention was now on him. "We're leaving, now!" Mac shouted, moving towards them. The phantoms surged forward, not running, but gliding over the deck, their silent screams now an audible psychic shriek that pierced Mac's skull. He fired the dart gun again, uselessly. He shoved Eris and Jensen behind him. "Back to the Charon! Move!" They scrambled back through the wreck, a desperate flight through the looping hostile corridors. The phantoms were everywhere now, phasing through walls, their grasping hands leaving trails of cold mist. The whispers were a cacophony in his ears, a symphony of death. It was the Odyssey all over again, the ghosts of the deep coming for him. They reached the airlock, tumbling into the submersible's docking collar. "Soren! Cycle the airlock! Get us out of here!" Mac yelled, slamming his hand on the inner hatch control. The hatch hissed open and they spilled into the clean, well-lit interior of the Charon. Soren was there, his expression unreadable. "Seal the outer hatch! Detach!" Mac roared, turning to help Eris. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Corrigan," Soren said, his voice as calm as ever. But now, That calmness was monstrous. In his hand was a pistol, identical to Mac's, and it was leveled at his chest. Mac froze. "What the hell are you doing, Soren?" "Following my primary directive," Soren stated flatly. "Thorne doesn't care about you, your sister, or that terrified engineer. He wants the asset. My orders are to secure Die Glocke. You were the key, the tool to get past the security system. Now that you're done, you are a liability. You'd leave us here," Eris whispered, horrified. A thunderous boom shook the Charon as a spectral fist slammed against the acrylic viewport. Outside, the darkness swarmed with figures, their faces pressed against the glass, their mouths wide in silent unison. The echo of the crew knew they were here. It wanted them. The hull groaned, not from water pressure, but from a psychic assault. Thorne knew what was down here. Mac snarled, connecting the dots. "You sent them in as bait." He had a theory, Soren admitted, his eyes not leaving Mac. That the field was dormant until stimulated by a conscious presence. He was right. "Now, step aside. I'm taking remote control of the Nautilus's salvage drones to extract the device. Once it's aboard, I will be leaving." "It'll tear this sub apart before you're done!" Jensen shrieked, pointing at the viewport where spiderweb cracks, not of glass but of pure energy, began to form. The phantoms were trying to breach the hull, to add them to their tortured chorus. The lights in the Charon flickered and died, plunging them into the red glow of the emergency lighting. The standoff was now a three-way conflict. Mac and his sister, the treacherous pilot, and the supernatural fury of the Hecate clawing its way in. Panic was a luxury they couldn't afford. The psychic shriek of the echo intensified, a drill boring into Mac's mind. The Charon's hull vibrated violently, a drum beaten by ghostly hands. "You're insane, Soren!" Aris shouted over the din. "That thing will destroy us all before your drones even get close!" "My orders are clear," Soren repeated. But for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face as a phantom sailor momentarily phased halfway through the viewport, its face inches from his, before being repelled by the sub's energy field. Mac's mind raced, adrenaline cutting through the fear. Brute force was useless. They couldn't fight the phantoms. They couldn't outrun them. The only way to survive was to end the broadcast, to shatter the source. "The bell," Mac said, his voice low and urgent. "We have to destroy it." Soren laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "And how do you propose to do that? A pistol?" "No," Mac said, his eyes locking onto Soren's. "With the Hecate's reactor, it's a primitive thorium pile, but the core is still there. If I can bypass the safety protocols and overload it, I can create a contained electromagnetic pulse, a massive one. It won't rupture the hull, but it will fry every exotic particle in that chamber. It will shatter the bell like glass." Eris's eyes widened. "It could work, a quantum field collapse." "It's a suicide mission," Soren stated, his gun still steady. "You'll be at ground zero." "We're already at ground zero," Mac shot back, gesturing at the swarming ghosts outside. "Give me 10 minutes. Help me." "Or die here with us." Another phantom slammed against the hull, and this time the lights flickered and a console sparked violently. The psychic pressure was immense, a physical weight. Soren looked from the failing systems to the terror on Jensen's face, to the resolute fury in Mac's eyes. The cold professionalism in his gaze finally cracked, replaced by the primal fear of a man staring into an abyss that was staring back. He had been a loyal soldier, but he had never signed up for this. He lowered his pistol. "What do you need?" The shift was instantaneous. The enemy within had become a desperate ally. "I need to get back to the reactor room," Mac said. "You keep them off me. Eris, Jensen, get the Charon ready for an emergency ascent. The moment you see the flash, you go. Don't wait for me." "Mac, no!" Eris cried. "It's the only way," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not leaving you here." He looked at her, the years of anger and distance melting away in the face of annihilation. "I'll be right behind you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Mac and Soren plunged back into the docking collar and into the nightmare of the Hecate. The phantoms were more aggressive now, a tide of spectral rage. Soren, his face a grim mask, fired his dart gun methodically. The projectiles did no damage, but the energy discharge of their propulsion system seemed to disrupt the apparitions for a precious second, making them flicker and recoil. They fought their way back to the bell chamber. The humming was a physical blow now, and the violet light from Die Glocke pulsed in time with the groans of the hull. Max scrambled to the reactor control panel, its gauges filmed with grime. He ripped the cover off, exposing a tangle of corroded wiring. "Hold them at the door!" he yelled. Soren stood his ground at the bulkhead, a lone sentinel against a ghostly legion. He was a brutally efficient marksman, placing shots that kept the phantoms just out of reach, buying Mac seconds at a time. "Hurry, Corrigan! They're adapting!" Mac worked with a salvage expert's desperate ingenuity, stripping wires with his teeth, rerouting power from decaying conduits. He was overloading the magnetic containment, turning the entire reactor into a massive, unstable capacitor. The hum of the bell began to falter, replaced by the rising whine of the ancient reactor. A new, clean, terrifying light began to glow from the core's housing. A phantom officer, the one with the hole in its chest, phased past Soren's defense and lunged at Mac. Soren spun, tackling the apparition. It was like wrestling with smoke and ice. The phantom's touch made Soren scream, a raw, agonized sound as his arm turned black with a frost-like energy burn. He kicked away from it, scrambling back to the doorway, his face pale with shock and pain. "It's almost done!" Mac yelled, making the final connection. A timer on the panel flickered to life. 60 seconds. "Go! Get back to the sub!" "No time!" Soren gasped, clutching his ruined arm. He looked at the swarm of ghosts pressing at the doorway, then back at Mac. A final moment of clarity, of atonement. Thorne's prize, let him rot. He turned and faced the oncoming horde. "Get your sister out. Go." Soren opened fire, a final defiant stand as the tide of the dead washed over him, his shouts and the hiss of his weapon silenced by the psychic shriek. Mac didn't hesitate. He ran. He sprinted through the now chaotic corridors, the entire wreck shaking as the reactor screamed towards critical. He launched himself through the airlock, sealing the inner door just as a wave of spectral energy slammed against it. "He's gone! Go, Eris! Go!" Aris, tears streaming down her face, slammed her hand on the controls. The Charon detached from the dead Nautilus, and its thrusters fired, pushing them away from the haunted wreck. Through the rear viewport, Mac saw the Hecate for the last time. A silent, blinding flash of white and violet light erupted from its core, expanding outwards. It wasn't an explosion of fire and metal, but of pure energy, of reality reasserting itself. The view screen whited out. Every system on the Charon went dead. They were adrift in the dark, the silence absolute. The ascent was a long, terrifying blackness. Without power, they drifted upwards slowly, borne by the sub's emergency ballast. Hours passed in silence. The three survivors huddled together in the cold red glow of the battery-powered emergency lights, listening to the creaks of their own vessel. Then, a change. The oppressive black outside the viewport softened to a deep indigo, then to a hopeful blue. With a final, gentle lurch, the Charon breached the surface. Mac forced the hatch open, and the clean, salt-laced air of a new day flooded the cabin. The sun was just breaking the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of pink and gold. The Atlantic was calm, its surface a placid mirror. On the distant horizon, they could see the shape of the Prometheus, waiting for a prize that would never come. The sailor's maw was silent. The ghosts of the Hecate were gone, their echo erased. Eris gripped his hand, her knuckles white. They had survived the ghosts of the deep, and in the light of the rising sun, Mac felt the cold hand of his own past finally begin to loosen its grip. He was a survivor, not a ghost. And for the first time in years, the vast open water didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like freedom.